A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah had been looking for the perfect apartment for weeks. They had been to many real estate agents, but nothing seemed to fit the bill. One day, they stumbled across an IKEA store and decided to go in. A dream apartment in IKEA. As they walked around the store, they became mesmerized by the many different apartments. There were ones with fancy cooktops, luxurious bedrooms, and cozy living rooms. It was like they had stepped into a dream world. A dream apartment in IKEA. They started to try the furniture out, lying on the beds, sitting in the chairs, and testing out the drawers. John and Sarah soon realized that they had stumbled upon their dream apartment. All they had to do was find a way to afford it. A dream apartment in IKEA. They sat down and talked about their budget. After a long discussion, they realized that if they pooled their resources and took on a few extra jobs, they could just about afford the apartment. It sounded like a lot of work, but they both agreed that it was worth it. A dream apartment in IKEA. So they decided to take the plunge. They signed the papers and soon they were the proud owners of the apartment of their dreams. It took a lot of hard work and dedication, but in the end, John and Sarah both knew that it was worth it. A dream apartment in IKEA. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah were finally in their new apartment. They had worked hard to make it happen, and now they were ready to start their new life. The apartment was everything they had dreamed of. The kitchen was modern and spacious, the bedrooms were cozy and inviting, and the living room was perfect for entertaining. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah were so excited to start decorating and making the apartment their own. They had already bought some furniture and were ready to start putting it together. But as they started to assemble the furniture, they quickly realized that they had bitten off more than they could chew. A dream apartment in IKEA. The furniture was complicated and the instructions were confusing. They had no idea what they were doing and were quickly becoming frustrated. John and Sarah knew that they had to figure out a way to assemble the furniture, or else their dream apartment would never be complete. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah decided to look for help. They asked around and eventually found a handyman who was willing to help them assemble the furniture. The handyman was experienced and knew exactly what to do. He quickly assembled the furniture and soon the apartment was complete. A dream apartment in IKEA. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah were thrilled with their new apartment. It was everything they had dreamed of and more. But as they looked around, they noticed something was missing. There was a piece of furniture that they had wanted, but it wasn't in the apartment. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah went back to the IKEA store to look for the missing piece. But when they got there, they realized that it was no longer available. They were disappointed, but they refused to give up. They decided to look for a different solution. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah went to the library and started looking through books on furniture design. They were hoping to find a design that they could use to make the missing piece. After hours of searching, they finally found a book with a design that they liked. It was perfect. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah went back to their apartment and started building the furniture. They worked hard and soon the piece was complete. It was exactly what they had wanted. But when they went to put it in place, they realized that something was missing. The piece didn't fit in the space. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah were frustrated. They had worked so hard to make the piece, but it didn't fit. They looked around for a solution, but nothing seemed to work. Then, John had an idea. He suggested that they use a saw to cut the piece down to size. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah got to work. They used a saw to cut the piece down to size and soon it fit perfectly in the space. They were relieved and excited. They had found a novel and interesting solution to their problem. But there was one thing missing. They hadn't expected to have to use a saw. A dream apartment in IKEA. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah looked around their new apartment and smiled. They had worked hard to make it perfect, and it was finally complete. But as they looked around, they noticed something strange. There was a box in the corner of the room that they hadn't seen before. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah opened the box and were surprised to find a saw inside. It was the same saw that they had used to cut the furniture down to size. They were confused. How had the saw gotten there? A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah looked around the room and noticed a note on the wall. It was from the handyman who had helped them assemble the furniture. The note said that he had left the saw as a surprise for them. He had known that they would need it and wanted to make sure they had it. A dream apartment in IKEA. John and Sarah smiled. They were touched by the handyman's kindness and generosity. They had worked hard to make their dream apartment a reality, and now it was complete. They had solved many of their problems, but the handyman's surprise was the icing on the cake.